would like to welcome to Intro to Android Development. I'm so excited to have all of you taking this course. And yeah, I'll just get right into it. So, yeah, just a quick ask feel free to do this as I lecture, which would be install Android Studio. We're going to use it today for a demo at the end of class. So just get that installed. And if you need any help, you can raise your hand and Mihili can come, or Justin over there as well, can come out and help you out. So yeah, start the download and setup process now. Raise your hand if you need any help. All right. Cool. So just a quick outline of what today's lecture is going to look like. We're going to talk about the goals of the course kind of more broadly, and then just some general introductions, course logistics, and then the actual fun part, the lecture, where you get to learn about front-end development, and finally, at the end, a little coding exercise and a demo. Okay, let's jump right in. So in terms of the goals of the course, I want you to just take a second to ask yourself, what the hell are we doing here? You know? Like, seriously, stop and ask yourself that question. So you chose to join Intro to Android. You chose to sit in this lecture hall right now. You know, you could have taken iOS, which probably 90% of the campus has iOS. You know, you could have taken backend and done, all the database stuff and powered a bunch of apps, right? You could have even taken web dev, but you're here in Intro to Android development. So just take a moment to ask yourself, why are you here? You know, why am I here? I don't know, but we're going to go over that hopefully. So yeah, maybe down the road, maybe 20 years later, Jetpack Compose, the new framework that Mihili and I redesigned the course to teach over the summer, maybe it will just get deprecated and be added to the Google graveyard, Maybe in 20 years, AI is going to just take over and software engineers will just be prompt engineers, just asking AIs to do things, right? So all of this sounds kind of bleak, but I don't want you to take this the wrong way. I do think you've made a good decision to take Intro to Android Development, and I want you to get more out of this course than just Android development. Okay, so yeah, of course, I want you to get practical hands-on experience in building Android apps. You're gonna have at the end of this course, you'll have a portfolio of apps you can show to your friends, discuss in interviews, put on your resume, right? But even more important than that, I want you to understand how to think like a front-end developer. I want you to learn how to learn things quickly and also just become a better engineer. Because what you'll realize after coding for a long time is that all of these patterns, they might seem specific to Android, but really they can be kind of abstracted away. And when you see the high level ideas, you can approach any problem with just a much better mindset. So yeah, that's a little bit about the goals for the course. And I know I was kind of roasting Android for a little bit, but I will say it's actually pretty nice. Mobile dev is more specialized, so you do tend to get paid a little bit more. There's also no on-call because mobile apps don't really just go down the way that backend systems do, which is kind of nice. If you're not familiar with on-call, basically at a company that you work at, you might be put in a rotation where you might have to get woken up at the middle of the night to fix a system. And this very rarely happens in mobile development. And the other thing is just the architecture of Android, as well as the programming language Kotlin, which we're going to get into a little bit today, is just really fun. So yeah, okay, so I know I started pretty aggressively, but take a step back and just do some introductions. So yeah, my name is Zach. I'm a junior in CS with a minor in math. This is my fourth semester on app dev and my second semester as course instructor. I also did it last fall. And yeah, fun fact about me is that I'm red-green colorblind. So, Android looks red to me. No, that's a joke, but go ahead.
Hi, I'm Mihili. I'm a sophomore in CS in the College of Engineering, and this is my second semester on app dev, and it's my first semester teaching. And fun fact about me, I used to play competitive Scrabble in high school. So if you guys ever want to talk about Scrabble, you can ask me.
Yeah, she also got me into Scrabble as well, but I'm not as competitive as her. Okay. And then here's our core staff. Justin, since you're here right now, might as well you want to give a little introduction?
I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be standing for this.
It's all good.
I'm Justin. I'm Android sub-team lead since this app dev course. I've been on the team for 6 semesters, CS major. But yeah, I've been on the team for a while. Second semester being Android lead, and I was course instructor at some point. I will say you guys are very lucky to have Zach and Haley as course instructors, and they're doing a really good job this semester of like rewriting the entire course to make it more modern. So absolutely take advantage of this like great semester we have for a course instructor.
Thank you, Justin. Yeah, and then here's all of our other core staff. Unfortunately, they're not here to introduce themselves, but they're all very friendly, very helpful people that you might be meeting during office hours. So cool. Okay. And then the super exciting stuff, the logistics. Whoa. All right. So in terms of enrollment, the ad deadline is October 23rd. The drop deadline is November 13th. You're going to enroll in CS 1998-602. If you have not done that yet on the Student Center, make sure to do so. There's going to be weekly attendance. So the first lecture, we don't do attendance, but we're going to do attendance throughout. And we're going to use Kahoot to take attendance and also do like a small quiz at the beginning of class. Yeah, also our lectures are all recorded. Like I posted the ed post about the Zoom option. So that is an option, although I highly encourage you to come to lecture. So this way, during the demo section, if you get stuck, you can ask for help. And it's also just a lot easier for me to see if you're raising your hand or something like that. Yeah, and then there's also the course textbook is like a huge resource. So that is linked right there. And the slides are also posted on the course textbook. So just android-course.cornellapdev.com, and that will bring you to that. Yeah, and then the course schedule, we're gonna have 6 projects, 6 lectures, and then a hack challenge as well. So yeah. And course grading, it is a pass-fail grading scheme. So greater than or equal to 70% is passing. But I do want to say, like, I don't think the grade should be your goal in this class. Like, your goal should be to learn something, regardless of what the grade is. So try to just keep that in mind. As long as you're learning, I feel like that's a very successful experience. Yeah, and then late policy. So we have 6 slip days, and you can use 2 max per assignment. Yeah, so that's some logistics. And then more for the grade breakdown. So assignments are worth 65% of your grade. The hack challenge is worth 20%. And the participation is worth 15%. And I'll get more into what the hack challenge is like later as it's coming up. But basically, it's just an opportunity for you to use what you've learned throughout the course to build a real app with people from who are taking the other courses such as iOS, design, and backend. You'll get to build a full app using in a cross-functional team, which is really cool. So yeah, and then more of just like what you'll get, I guess. I kind of already went over all of this. So yes, academic integrity. Okay, so here's Walker White. He's like sponsoring this course, and you don't want to upset Walker White. So searching is good, plagiarism is bad. I encourage all of you to search things up on the internet. That is like a huge way that you learn. I even encourage you to like ask ChatGPT questions. And like I probably get into like how to use ChatGPT well to learn like a bit later. But yeah, just like asking like syntax questions like, oh, what's the syntax for an if statement or something like that, you know? Like the internet and ChatGPT are like really good for that. So yeah, definitely like search, but do not plagiarize, like don't ask for entire solutions. And yeah, this is also like all the work in this class is done solo. There are no partners allowed. So yeah. Okay, so now we're going to get into the more interesting part, which is Kotlin. So this is the programming language that Android Studio uses. And I'm just going to outline some high-level like rules of this programming language that you can hopefully understand. So the first rule is static typing. So if you're familiar with types in programming language, like you have a variable and every variable basically has some sort of type. So it could be like a number, it could be a string, right? So yeah, so all of these variables have types. And the interesting thing about Kotlin is that all the types are evaluated at compile time, which means before you even run your app, you know the types of all of your variables. And if you don't specify the type, then Kotlin will infer the type for you. So this is a like pretty important fact. And I think as you write Kotlin, you'll sort of like start to understand why. But yeah, the next big thing is mutability. So when you declare a variable in Kotlin, there are 2 main ways that you can declare that. First is with the val keyword. And when you declare a variable with a val keyword, it cannot be reassigned. So you can't change name after it's instantiated, as opposed to var. So if you use var to declare a variable, then you can change it after, you can reassign it after it's been instantiated. So just a general tip for this course, I always prefer to use val over var. Like you only want to use var when you have to. And the reason is it just gives you like a lot more guarantees about the values that are in your code. So if you have something that you instantiated with val, then you know that that can't change down the line, and it just makes debugging a lot easier. Yeah, next is nullability. So we'll get into this more next week with the Kotlin lecture. But basically, if you're familiar with Java or Python, any value can hold the like null value at any time. But in Kotlin, you have to explicitly say that this is a nullable type. So if you have that question mark at the end of the type, it means that the type could be null, or it could have like the contents of what we're looking for. So name could either be like an actual string of words, or it could be null. But that's only if that question mark is there. If the question mark is not there, then that means that you're guaranteed to have some sort of string at the value name. Yeah, I think I went through all of that like a little bit fast. Does anyone have any questions on any of that? Yeah.
So is var just like just pointers to different like basically like the memory addresses of the different like objects you create, or like I guess data values you create, and val is just like one fixed type that you just can't change ever?
Yeah, so there's actually, I wouldn't really say that. So you can like, let's say you have, if you're familiar with the notion of an array list, or basically just like a list that you can add items into and remove items out of, right? So I could actually use val to create a list of students in this class, for example. So I could say like val students equals mutable list of, and then I could, put all of your names in this list. But even though that was assigned with val, even though that variable was created with val, I can still call methods like add and remove on the list. So what val actually prevents you from doing is it prevents you from reassigning it. So if I had like val students equals list of, and then I tried to say students equals, and then something else entirely, that would not work. But if I wanted to call methods on student, on the students list, I'm like always allowed to do that, basically. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's just like you can't change the reference to it, but you can still change the like state of the whatever's in that reference.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and we're gonna go over this like more in depth as well during the Kotlin lecture next week, but just want to get your minds turning, I guess. Yeah, okay. And then we also have some methods on nullability. I actually don't think I'm gonna go over this now. I'll just save this for next week's lecture. Cool. Okay, so let's do an overview of Android Studio. So hopefully you all have it installed. If not, that's totally fine. You can just look at these slides. But yeah, so this is what Android Studio looks like. You have like a few different tabs here. Hopefully it's not too hard to see because of the dark mode, but you have like a main editor view, which you can use to view the code that you're writing. You have a toolbar at the top, and that's where you're going to run your app, choose your emulator. You also have the project panel on the left, which is going to be like how you can see the file structure of your apps. And then you have this bottom bar. So this bottom menu bar can hold like a lot of different content. I usually use it for the logs to basically see the logs of my app. So this way, if I'm like writing a print statement to try to debug a piece of code, it would appear down there in the bottom bar. So that's like a little overview. And this is just something you'll also just get used to as you use Android Studio more. Yeah, and then there's the emulator. So the way that you're going to test your apps is most likely going to be through an emulator unless you have an Android phone. So yeah, virtual testing is very commonly used. It will run a little bit slower than your physical device, but yeah, installing an emulator I'd say is pretty straightforward. Like Android Studio will do most of the hard work for you, but okay. And then an activity. So this is another just like fundamental Android development concept. A screen is basically referred to as an activity. It's just like a vocab term, and it is where we write our application logic. So in our activity, we're going to basically like have our main app just contained in this activity, and that is what is going to display to the user. So yeah, when you make a new, it's good to be familiar with this notion, because when you make a new app, you're going to see a class called like main activity, and it's just a good idea to know what this is, that this is like the sort of like entry point to your app. Cool. Okay. So here's what the main activity looks like in a new Jetpack Compose application. So it is a class with an onCreate method. And we're not going to go too in depth into this, but basically this onCreate method is called whenever your app is run, like the initial run of the app, Android will call this onCreate method. And then you don't have to understand what like all of this means, but essentially that set content is basically just setting the content of your app to the UI that you specify inside the curly braces. So like there we specify a theme, and then we have this like greeting message that pops up. So yeah, this is just something you want to understand at like a high level. Don't worry about what like enable edge to edge means, for example. I honestly don't even know what that means. So yeah, anyone have any questions on this? Great. Yeah, then the parts of an activity. So this slide like is a little bit dated, but sometimes you still will use XML. Like technically, even in Jetpack Compose, the main activity does have an XML file associated with it. And if you've worked with like web development before, you might think of your XML file in Android kind of like an HTML file in web development, where it kind of just contains your UI. Yeah, and you don't really this isn't like super important, but it's just good to be familiar with how this stuff works at a core level. So okay. Now let's start introducing Jetpack Compose. So Jetpack Compose is what has made XML pretty much obsolete, and why I wasn't really caring if you like super rigorously understood, why there's an activity underscore main.xml still, right? So it eliminates the need for an XML file. And yeah, it handles UI logic within what is called a composable, which is basically just a special function in Kotlin. And Mihaly is going to get into this more in her lectures, but basically what you'll learn is that all UI elements are basically just functions, functions that take input. So this text, for example, it takes a text value as input and also a modifier. And then what this function outputs is like displaying text on the screen. So yeah, it's good to get the idea that all of your UI elements are actually just Kotlin functions. And I think this will become more intuitive as you code more Android. So yeah. Cool. Okay. So layout in Jetpack Compose. So this is a really important concept, and I think this is one that extends beyond just Jetpack Compose to basically all front-end development. So today I'm going to be trying to answer the question of, we have this certain layout that we want to achieve, right? Like we have these, if you take like Instagram, for example, you have all like the stories, like those little circles at the top, and they're spread out in a row. And then below that, you have this like feed that you can scroll, and this is all layout. So how do we specify to this computer program, where we want our elements to be arranged? So this is where the idea of what I like to call the flexbox pattern in front-end development comes in. So the idea of how you can arrange things is you have rows and columns. And basically, this dotted line here represents your row, and this dotted line represents your column. And it's a very simple idea. Basically, inside a row, all elements that you place will be arranged horizontally. And inside a column, all the elements that you place will be arranged vertically. So yeah, it's actually a really simple idea. And all UI, or like pretty much all UI that you see, is just going to be like some different combination of rows and columns. So yeah, and then there's also another like idea that I want to introduce you to, which is the axes of rows and columns. So basically, we can refer to this this axis that basically goes in the direction of the way that the child elements are arranged. We can refer to that as the main axis. And the main axis in Kotlin is identified by the keyword arrange. So for example, if I place a column and I want to put things in the center of that column, I would say I want to arrange center, right? And that arrangement would place the elements that I put in the column inside the center of the column. And then we have this other idea of the cross axis. So the cross axis is just the axis that is like perpendicular to the main axis. And you can see that for rows, like you're arranging elements horizontally, but the cross axis is vertical. And for columns, you're arranging elements vertically, but the cross axis is horizontal. And the way that you're going to interact with the cross axis in Kotlin is through the keyword align. So let's say that I'm like building Instagram and I have a row of these of the stories at the top, right? And I'm trying to arrange them in this row. I could use align center, and even though the circles are going horizontally next to each other, they would be aligned like in the center of the row vertically. Yeah, so that's like main axis and cross axis. And yeah, align or arrange and align are the keywords that you're going to be using to interact with them. Anyone have any questions on that? Okay, I guess I'm doing a good job. Yeah, so here's Instagram, the example that I was using. And we could just consider like basically this almost the entire page could just be a column. So this is like how I see apps as a front-end developer, right? Then the thing is that inside of this column, we have a bunch of rows. So here we have a row that has an arrangement of space between. So remember, arrangement interacts with the main axis of the row. So that's going to be changing the horizontal distribution of the items. And space between just means we're going to put as much space between the items as possible. And you can see that since it's vertically centered within the row, this would have an alignment of center. So that's just one example. And then you can see I also have this other row here that I decided to like say that I would have a row for those individual icons. Because if I didn't have those individual icons in a row, then everything would be equally spaced in that parent row. So instead, I just decided to like use space between to separate those items out as far as possible, and then contain all like those three icons in their own row, which might be spaced by like a certain amount of pixels. So yeah, space by is another type of arrangement that just allows you to place items that are like X amount of pixels apart, basically. So yeah, and then you can see like maybe this the stories is just like a normal row. So yeah, does that example make sense to everyone? Yeah.
You have like a big screen, right? Say like a tablet where you're holding it like this way. Like is that 16 pixels like still like if you have a really big screen, is it gonna look really small? Like are the icons gonna be really close to each other? Whereas like if you're on like a smaller screen, they might look a little bit more away from each other.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I guess like first call out is that in mobile development, you typically don't really consider like tablets or like really big screens. So yeah, like typically that's not something that we consider, but if we did want to consider it, yeah, that's a really great call out. So 16 like pixels would actually just be like the same 16 pixels, regardless of your screen size. So a way to solve this problem would be to essentially like I was kind of like I guess if I was developing this for like an industry app, what you could do is actually put a spacer like in between each of these, and you could give the spacer a weight of 1. And the weight basically just means that it will grow it will just like keep expanding until it runs out of space, So that is kind of like one way to remedy that, and also just like using arrangements. So instead of spacing by 16, I could probably I think there's actually another one that has this pattern where you have one thing on the left, one thing on the right, and one thing in the center. I don't remember what it's called right now, but yeah. Any other questions?
So is that why like Instagram looks really weird on my tablet? So, like it's like really small on my tablet, or like did they just not consider like the
I guess not. I had more faith in Instagram, to be honest, but yeah, maybe they just didn't consider for tablet, which is kind of surprising. But yeah, that definitely could be it. Any other questions? Okay, cool. Great. Okay, so now a practice question. So here's some like Jetpack Compose code, and I want to see if you can figure out like where are these red and blue boxes going to be. So you can see that I have, or oh wait, that should say, I guess. Okay, sorry about that. This should probably say blue. But yeah, basically we have a column here, and then inside of that column we have a row. And these both are actually using alignment. So yeah, wait, okay. Yeah, so try to think about like where these would be positioned on a screen. So like an example answer that I might give would be like top left or something like that, or like bottom middle, you know? So try to think about like where these boxes are going to be positioned, and then if anyone has an answer, raise your hand. Yeah. Yes, that is correct. So middle right. The reason is that we have this column here, and the column is using a horizontal alignment. So on the cross axis of the column, it's being pushed to the end, and the end is on the right side. And then our row is using an alignment of center vertically, and it's actually filling the entire max size, or it's filling the size of the column. So that center vertically will place the boxes like in the middle of the row, and then that is why you get this like middle right alignment. Okay. And then just like another really useful trick that I want to you to all be aware of and use throughout the entire course is preview. So this basically allows you to get a like almost live updates on how a component will look before you actually run your app. And it just makes development way easier, way faster. So just to show you an example of what a preview might look like, let's say I have this like content composable that's trying to show my boxes, and then I want to create a preview of it. I basically just add these two annotations at composable will always be there, but you add at preview. And the other thing is that preview functions cannot take in any parameters. So this always has to be empty. And a cool trick that you can do, like let's say I'm trying to preview a text, and text will always take in like a text parameter because you want to be able to specify the text, right? So the question is, okay, how am I going to preview a text? Because I can't just like add at preview there because it has a parameter. And that's where you can like create this helper function that has no parameters and then calls the function that you want to preview with some sort of like default value for the parameter. And that is going to allow you to preview it. And yeah, hopefully if time permits, we can like mess around with this a bit during the demo, and it should make a bit more sense. Yeah, okay. The other like high level answer. Oh yeah, you have a question or?
Justin, yeah, I have a problem like with the installation.
For Android Studio?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Oh. Yeah, Mihili can help as well. Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, so the next like important Android concept is logcat. I use this all the time when I'm debugging. So when you write code normally, you'd probably use print statements to debug and gain information about your program. Unfortunately, if you just do print line in Kotlin, that won't actually do anything. You won't be able to see anything. So you have to use these log.d and log.e. So it's pretty rare that I use log.e. I almost always just use log.d, but log.e is just for outputting an error message. So yeah, these will be like the most used throughout the course. And this tag parameter, like you can literally put whatever you want for the tag parameter. It doesn't matter as long as you put any string. And then the message is what you actually want to display. Yeah, I don't really know why the tag is there. Like I don't think anyone knows. But okay. And then settings to change. So I hope all of you have Android Studio installed by now. If not, just remember to do this later because this will like make your life so much easier. Okay. So the first setting that I want you to change is imports. So like whenever you code, you're gonna basically depend on a lot of different libraries. And these libraries, like you don't want to have to be writing out the import statement every single time. So you can enable this setting which will basically add imports and optimize these imports on the fly, which is really great. So yeah, the way that you get to the settings screen is you can go into Android Studio and then click on Android Studio like at the top bar, at least for Mac, and then you can hit settings. If anyone has trouble like getting into the settings screen, please let any of us know, and then we should be good. So yeah. I'll give everyone like a minute to change that setting. Okay, can you raise your hand if you were able to change the settings successfully? Okay, seems like we have a decent amount of people now. So I'm going to move on, and if you had any trouble, you can let Justin know or Mihili, and they will help you. So, okay, the next setting that I want you to change is actions on save. So the really like another great thing about the Android Studio development environment is that it can auto format your code. So like sometimes it's very easy to like get a little bit lazy and not space all of your code consistently. Like I think it's really hard to put the same amount of spacing between like every line of code that you write, you know? So the IDE will do it for you, which is really great. And the way that you can do this is I recommend just searching actions on save in the settings page, go to actions on save, and then check these three boxes. And one annoying thing to take note of is that like whenever you open a new project in Android Studio, you're gonna have to reselect these settings again, which does get kind of annoying. I don't really know why they did it like that, but yeah, I definitely recommend turning this on every time you start a new project. It's super useful. How is that going for people? Everyone able to enable this? Okay, cool. All right, so let's get into the demo. So I have like a couple goals for this demo. First would just be we just want to like show a black box on a screen, and then also like do a little exercise with Kotlin just to get you more familiar with the coding language. So let's jump right into it. Okay. I'm going to change so it's mirrored. And okay. So we're going to create our first Android Studio project. Oh, okay. Okay, yeah, so we're going to create our first Android Studio project. So when you open Android Studio, you should see something like this, and you should see a new project button. If you already made a project, feel free to just, stay in that project. And if you don't see this, you can go to File, New, and New Project to create a project. So let's all just click on New Project. Yeah, and then you want to choose empty activity, and it should have this icon in the middle. So that's the Jetpack Compose logo, showing that you're starting a new Compose project. So yeah, you want to have that selected, and then click Next. Okay, then your application, you can name it anything you want. The minimum SDK doesn't really matter. I think all the defaults should be fine here. So after that, you can hit Finish. And then this will open the Android Studio environment. So yeah, was that a good pace for everyone? I see some nods. That's very good. Okay, cool. Yeah, so everyone's here, and now we can see it's gonna take a bit to actually configure the project. And since this is a new project, I'm just gonna turn on the formatting because I cannot live without it. So turn that on. Yeah, and then we're gonna let this load a little bit. And then once it's loaded, so it's loading that blue bar down there. But I guess I can just start. Okay, so basically this inside of this scaffold, right? Where a scaffold is just a UI element that kind of helps you organize your UI if you have like a bottom bar. Like for example, with Instagram, we saw that had a bottom bar. It could also help organize with like a top bar or something like that. And then inside your scaffold, you put your main content. And in this case, the main content is the greeting. So yeah, I'll just explain this a little bit. So the greeting, this is going to call this composable function, right? All UI elements are just functions. So we call the greeting function and we pass in the name Android and the modifier, which just gives it this padding here. And then greeting creates this text right here that just outputs hello Android. So, and we even have a preview for this. Let's run the preview. And we can see, we should be able to see hello Android. Yeah. And then what, I'm trying to think about how I want this. Okay. So, oh, there's eatery. But yeah, so we can wait for this preview to run. And yeah, we'll be able to see hello Android. Yeah, I guess another thing that we could do is try just adding a box to the screen that I mentioned. So the way that you can do that, yeah, there it is. Hello Android. Very cool. Yeah, so let's try to add a box under the greeting. So for this first example, I'm just going to go through it with you since this is like probably your first time ever in Android Studio. So I'll just go through this step by step. So if I want to add a box under greeting, the first thing I want to do is specify my layout. So I'm going to add a column. And then you can double click here or you can press tab. I prefer to press tab. And that will fill in this function for you. And we're gonna get like more into why the syntax is the way it is a bit later. But for now, we have this column and we can put things inside of the column. So we're gonna put the greeting inside of the column. Just drag that in there. And then what we can do is put in a box. So yeah, you like to put in a new composable, kind of like what we saw with column. We're just gonna start typing the name and then press tab. And this, you can see this box actually requires a parameter, which is called modifier. So I'm just going to give it the default value. And Mihli will talk about modifiers a bit more in her lecture, but it's basically the way that we can stylize our boxes. So we have a modifier, and let's actually give this a little bit of style. So to add something to a modifier, we use dot, and then we start typing the name. So there's that weight modifier I mentioned earlier, but we're gonna do required size. And I'm just gonna say this will be like 200 pixels. And pixels in Android Studio are actually this like DP is what they call it. I'm pretty sure it's like a density pixel is the name. So yeah, you do dot DP, and that might come up red for you at first. And then if that does, you just have to import it. So yeah, 200.dp. And then we also want to actually give this box color. So we're going to use the background modifier and then do color.black. And if I did this correctly, I'm just improvising here. So we'll see what happens. But we should see a box under the text. Yay. Everyone able to get that working? How about you give a thumbs up if you were able to get the box to show under the text? Okay, it looks like some people are still working it out. That's totally fine. I will increase my font size a bit so it's easier to see. And I'll actually turn it to light mode. Let's see. There we go. That should be easier to see, I think. Yeah. So yeah, we have our greeting, and then we just have this box that's like size 200. Yeah, light mode actually, I don't know if that helps. I'm gonna go back to dark mode to save my eyes. Okay. Yeah, now you can see the app easier as well. Okay. So yeah, whether you have that done or not, I'm also gonna like introduce the next task, and that will be to let's try to see if we can place let's try to place like a box right here and right here. Try to see if you can do that. Yeah. What? Yeah. Oh really? Wait, are they getting a bill there? I mean, I can take a look. Oh. What area were you in? What the error say? Just kidding. Oh, okay, that's not the same error than I have. So. Yeah. No, there's one that's study earlier. But I think it's working for. Yeah, also, Lucy just making a new project from scratch, so he didn't download these start to go. Yeah. Yeah. So. Oh, yeah. Also, one more thing, like feel free to use the internet as much as you want for this task if you're struggling. So yeah.
How do we preview a code?
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's another thing that I can show. So yeah, I guess I'll just show that off now actually. Yeah, so if you want to preview without having to rerun the app every time, what you could do is basically, let's just create a composable. So the way that we create a composable is this app composable annotation, and then you write fun, so you're creating a new function, and I'll just say that this is called main content. And now inside my main content, I want all this to show up. So I'm just going to move this into main content. And then I can call, oh, and actually, so here's something kind of interesting, which is that we need to use this inner padding parameter. This is kind of just a requirement of using scaffold, which is we need to use this parameter. So what we can do is pass that into, or yeah, we can pass a modifier into main content. So what I just did there was I added modifier as a parameter. And remember that Colin is statically typed. So we need to specify that the type of this modifier is modifier. And then, yeah, actually, I'll just remove this. We don't need that right now. So we specify that it takes in a modifier parameter. And now I can call this main function. And I'll say that I'll give it a modifier of modifier dot padding of inner padding. And now this goes away because that's being used. And then, okay, how do we actually preview this? So what we can do, right? We can't, if we put app preview here, the issue is that you'll see it comes up red and says, yeah, composable functions with non-default values parameters are not supported by preview. So this modifier is a parameter that you basically need to provide this information if you want to display main content. But with preview, it doesn't know how to provide it. So that's when you can make at preview at composable main content preview, right? And then what we can do here is pass in main content, and we can just give it a default modifier. So, oh, and this should actually, we're not using inner padding anymore, so this is just modifier. And if we run this preview, we should see our main content. Let's see if that worked. Yeah, so there's our main content. And you can also view it in this other layout as well. So if you want to view your previews outside of the app, instead of like clicking on, or yeah, instead of showing the emulator, right, at this top section, you can click on the split view. And that will show you the main content preview. So it's a bit hard to see the text because of the background, but the text is indeed there. Yeah, so I hope that makes sense for setting up a preview. And another, like something that I like to do with my previews is I can basically surround the content that I'm previewing in a column that fills the max size and has a background color of white. Oops. what is this? That's weird. I don't know why it's happening. Okay. And now we can see this is a lot more what our like actual mobile app will look like. So there's our preview. And let's try to do the task that I laid out earlier. So we wanted a box right here and a box right here. So yeah, let's see if we're able to do that. Okay. So I'm gonna go inside of our main content function, and we want to vertically arrange some items. So let's do a column. Okay. I'm kind of winging this right now, so hopefully I don't mess this up. Okay. So let's see. What we could do is we want our first box to be aligned in the center of this column, and then the second box to be aligned bottom right. So we could basically use, let's see, so we can use, all right, yeah, an arrangement, vertical arrangement, wait, this is a column. So vertical arrangement is arrangement.center, and we're going to make it just fill the max size. And then from there, let's get like that. Okay, so there's our column, and we can put a box inside this column, and we're gonna give it a required size again, and a color. So let's go with red. And okay, that's our first box. And then for our next box, we want to position it bottom right. So let's put in a row down here, and we can fill max size as well here. So modifier dot or we can just fill max width actually, since we just want our row to grow out horizontally. And then we can also give it an arrangement because we're putting something at the end of the row. So an arrangement would be arrangement.end. Okay. And then the next thing that we want to do is just add another box. So yeah, let's add another box here. And interesting. Okay, so it's not coming up. Now we can try to debug. I think one reason could be that instead of using fill max size, I might just want this to grow. So let's try wave one. Oh wait, I forgot to put a color on the box. Okay. And yay, okay, that's good. That scared me for a minute there, but we do have our box, which is great. So yeah, that is like basically it's kind of half in the ground, which isn't the best, but it is there. And I think like a nice way that we can like visualize this is by putting borders around as well. So we can like this is a really good debugging technique, which is we can actually let's see with two. So by using the dot border modifier, we can actually see like where our column is. So you can see here our column extends like actually down to the bottom. It'd probably be easier to see if it was like yellow. That did not make it easier to see. Red. Okay. Yeah, so you can kind of see down here that it actually extends all the way to the bottom of the screen. So if we try using weight here instead, let's see what happens. Yeah, so that's more of the behavior that we want. So now with using weight, instead of just like greedily taking out the entire size, it just expands to fit the size that it can fit, right? And the only like region that it can fit is down to there because this box has this like blue box has a required size of 200 EP. So the right thing to use there is weight. And yeah, so that's a little learning experience for all of us, I guess. Cool. So that's the demo. It is like 9:24. If anyone has any questions, I am happy to answer them. Otherwise, that's pretty much it. So you're free to leave as well.
Oh. Java.